You felt it before you could explain it. Something shifted. The energy changed. Maybe it was subtle. A message with a different quality to it. A reach that had a texture you had not felt in a while. Maybe it was more direct. Either way, something in you registered it before your mind had time to form an opinion about it. The question arrived immediately after. The one you have been trying not to ask. The one that the part of you still invested in the outcome has been waiting to have a reason to ask. Are they coming back? This video is going to answer that question, honestly, with the full psychological context it deserves. But it is also going to do something the title does not advertise. It is going to ask a question in return. One that matters more than whether they are coming back. One that the hoping tends to crowd out, but that deserves equal time. What do you actually want to happen if they do? The psychology of the avoidant return has specific features that are worth understanding before anything else. Because the return, when it occurs, rarely looks the way the hoping imagined it would look. The hoping tends to construct a version of the return that has a quality of arrival, of someone who has done the work and changed, and is now showing up differently. More present, more available. More capable of the genuine, consistent, reciprocal investment that the connection always needed to become what it had the potential to be. That version of the return exists. It is not fantasy. Some avoidants do the work. Some reckonings do produce genuine transformation. Some people, confronted with the full consequence of their pattern, find the willingness and the resources to actually change the operating system rather than simply running it on new material. But that version is not the most common one. The most common version of the avoidant return is something different. Something that looks similar enough to the hoped-for version to be compelling, and is different enough in its actual structure to reproduce the original dynamic, if it is not examined clearly. The most common version is the return driven not by transformation, but by the discomfort of your absence. By the avoidant nervous system registering the loss of the background security your consistent presence provided, by the attachment system responding to genuine loss with the reaching that loss produces, not the reaching of someone who has changed, but the reaching of someone who is uncomfortable with the consequence of not having changed and is seeking the relief of your return. That distinction between reaching from transformation and reaching from discomfort is the most important thing to understand about the avoidant return. And it is the distinction that the hoping makes most difficult to maintain. Because the reaching feels the same from the outside regardless of what is driving it. The warmth of their renewed contact, the quality of their attention, the things they say and the way they say them, all of that can be genuine and compelling and genuinely moved by real feeling, without it being the product of genuine transformation. Feeling moved is not the same as having changed. Being affected by the loss is not the same as having examined what produced the loss. Wanting you back is not the same as having become someone capable of sustaining what wanting you back requires. The avoidant can want you back with complete sincerity, can feel the pull of the attachment with genuine intensity, can reach with real warmth and real emotion and real investment in the moment of reaching, and still be, structurally, the same person whose operating system will produce the same pattern once the relief of your return has settled, and the intimacy begins to rebuild and the alarm system reactivates with the closeness it was always going to reactivate with. This is not a reason to refuse the return automatically. It is a reason to receive the return with clear eyes rather than with the relieved, hope-confirmed, finally quality of someone whose waiting has been validated. Clear eyes means asking the question that the relief of their return makes most difficult to ask. Not what does this feel like? What does this show? Not how warm is the reaching? What is the reaching actually demonstrating about what has changed in the internal architecture that produced the distance in the first place? Evidence of internal change is specific. It is not the warmth of the return. Warmth is available without transformation. It is not the sincerity of the feeling. Feeling is available without the work that changes what feeling produces in behavior. It is not even the acknowledgement of the pattern. Insight is available without the integration that makes insight behaviorally consequential. Evidence of internal change is whether they are doing the actual, sustained, professionally supported work of examining the operating system. Whether they can articulate not just what they did, but what produced it, and what specifically they are doing differently. Whether the reaching is accompanied by the humility of someone who understands the cost of the pattern rather than the urgency of someone who is uncomfortable with its consequence. Whether time, not the first week, not the charged early period of return, but time, in ordinary moments, under the ordinary pressure of rebuilding intimacy, produces behavior that is genuinely different from what the pattern always produced before. The wanting you hooked part of the title. That needs direct address because it is the most charged element and deserves honesty rather than the softening that makes it easier to hear. The avoidant does want you hooked, not through conscious calculation, not as a deliberate strategy deployed with awareness of its mechanism, but functionally. The hooked quality of your attention, the fact that you are still oriented toward the connection, still invested in the outcome, still organized around the question of whether they are coming back. That orientation provides the background security that the avoidance nervous system was always relying on more than it acknowledged. Your hookedness confirms the connection is intact, confirms the door is still open, confirms that the distance, however extended, has not produced the permanent, irrevocable consequence of your genuine goneness. And that confirmation, received by the nervous system rather than the conscious mind, is regulatory. It reduces the anxiety that genuine loss produces. It restores the background sense of security that the pattern depends on to feel survivable. So when the avoidant reaches, when the return occurs, part of what is being sought, however unconsciously, is the confirmation that you are still hooked, still available, still oriented toward them in the way that makes their continued existence inside the pattern feel safe. The reaching is genuine, the caring that motivates it is genuine, and it is simultaneously, structurally, functionally serving the maintenance of the dynamic rather than the transformation of it. Both are true, and the both being true is the thing that clear eyes must hold without collapsing it into the simpler version that the hoping or the cynicism would prefer. So what do you do with the return, or with the anticipation of it, or with the question of whether the changed energy you are sensing is the beginning of one? The first thing is to complete the question the title's promise interrupted. Not, are they coming back? What do you actually want if they do? That question deserves honest engagement rather than the automatic yes of someone whose hoping has been waiting for the return as the resolution of the entire arc. What you want is not the return. What you want is what the return would represent if it were the genuine transformation version. You want the genuine, consistent, reciprocally invested, showing up when it costs something connection that the avoidant dynamic was always almost producing and never quite delivering. You want to be genuinely met, to be genuinely known, to be chosen not in the urgent, loss-activated reaching of someone uncomfortable with the consequence of your absence, but in the sustained, ordinary Tuesday level, nothing particular prompting it choosing, of someone who is actually building something with you. That is what you want, not their return specifically. The experience their return would represent if the transformation were real. And that distinction between wanting the return and wanting what the return would represent is the one that changes how you receive whatever is currently happening. It allows you to hold the genuine warmth of their reaching without immediately organizing yourself around it. To receive the contact with genuine care without the relieved finally quality that reorganizes your interior around the connection before the evidence has been examined. It allows you to ask, with genuine, non-hostile, evidence-based curiosity, what is actually being offered here, not in the moment of reaching, which will always feel like more than the pattern's average, because loss-activated reaching always has a heightened quality. But over time, in the ordinary moments that follow the initial return, in the behavior rather than the declaration, in the showing up rather than the reaching out, the showing up is the evidence, not the quality of the message that initiated the return. What happens on the third week, the fifth? When the initial urgency has settled and the relief of the reconnection has become familiar, and the intimacy is beginning to rebuild toward the threshold where the alarm system historically activates. What happens then is the answer to the question the return poses, not whether they came back, whether they stayed present when presence became difficult, whether the pattern interrupted itself this time, whether something is genuinely different in the operating system, or whether the return produced the temporary relief of your presence and the operating system is now running its familiar program on the restored connection. You will know, not immediately, not in the charged early weeks, but you will know the pattern now in the specific embodied pre-verbal way that genuine experience produces knowledge. You know what the managed distance feels like before it is visible. You know the quality of presence that is genuine and the quality that is performing genuineness. You know the difference between someone who is trying and someone who is managing, between movement toward you and management of the distance between you. That knowing, developed through everything you have been through, sharpened by everything this series has examined, is the most valuable thing you bring to the return if it occurs. Not the hoping, not the relief of the validation, the knowing, The clear-eyed, evidence-based, body-level knowing of someone who has learned to read the specific situation with genuine accuracy. Trust the knowing, not over the evidence. Let the evidence be primary. But trust your reading of the evidence. Trust the first registration, the pre-verbal, body level, this is familiar, and familiar in which direction, quality of what you are encountering. You are not the same person who entered the original dynamic. You have been through too much honest examination to be available for the same quality of hope over evidence reading that the original dynamic required. The instrument is different now, more calibrated, more reliable, more genuinely in service of your actual life rather than in service of the hoping. And your actual life, the one that has been built throughout this series, the ground and the okayness and the genuine inhabitation of your own days, that life is the context in which the return is being evaluated. Not the suspended life of someone whose primary orientation is toward the resolution of the connection. The actual, present, genuinely inhabited life of someone who has somewhere to be. That context changes everything about the evaluation, because the evaluation is no longer being conducted by someone who needs the return to be the transformation version in order to be okay. It is being conducted by someone who is already okay, who can receive the return with genuine warmth and genuine curiosity and clear eyes simultaneously, who does not need it to be anything other than what the evidence shows it to be, who can be moved by the genuine feeling of their reaching without reorganizing the interior around the hope of what the reaching might become. That person, the one evaluating from the ground rather than from the suspended hoping, gives the return the honest assessment it deserves. Neither the automatic yes of someone who has been waiting, nor the automatic no of someone who has converted their clarity into armor. The honest, evidence-based, patient, genuinely discerning assessment of someone who knows what they are looking for and is willing to look clearly for it. The return, if it comes, will show you what it is. Not in the first week. In the ordinary ones. In the behavior when nothing particular is prompting the best version. In whether something is genuinely different. Or whether the return is the pattern completing its cycle. Reaching when the loss becomes uncomfortable. Restoring the connection to the level the nervous system requires. And then, as the intimacy rebuilds and the alarm system reactivates, producing the familiar distance that was always the next phase of the cycle. You know the cycle. You will recognize which one this is. Trust that. More than the warmth of the reaching, more than the relief of the return. More than the part of you that has been waiting to have its hope confirmed. Trust what you actually see, when you see it clearly. That is enough. It has always been enough. The honest answer to what comes after the return has been evaluated. After the clear eyes have done their work and the evidence has been read accurately, and the pattern has either revealed itself as intact or demonstrated genuine change, is simpler than the series has sometimes made it. You make a decision, and you live with it, not as a conclusion to an arc, not as the final chapter of a story about someone who understood deeply and healed thoroughly and arrived at the exactly right response. Just a decision, made by a real person with incomplete information and genuine feeling, and the honest, imperfect, genuinely human uncertainty that accompanies any significant choice. The decision does not require certainty. That is worth saying directly, because the hoping tends to wait for certainty before acting, and the certainty tends not to arrive in the form the hoping is waiting for. You will not wake up one morning with complete confidence about the right answer. The feeling and the clarity and the evidence will point in a direction without eliminating the doubt. And the decision will have to be made from inside the doubt rather than after its resolution. That is how decisions actually work. Not after the uncertainty resolves. Inside it, with whatever clarity is available, with the honest, imperfect, genuine assessment of what the evidence shows and what you actually want and what the cost of the various options actually is. What does the evidence show? Not the evidence of the return's warmth. Warmth is available without transformation and has been established as insufficient evidence. The evidence of what has actually changed, whether anything has. Whether the behavior in ordinary moments describes someone who is genuinely doing something different, or someone who is doing the same thing with higher current motivation. What do you actually want? Not the idealized version. The real, specific, honestly assessed version of what you want from this particular person in this particular situation. If what you want is the connection this person is currently capable of offering, with its limitations, with its ceiling, with the honest understanding of what the pattern is likely to produce even with genuine effort toward change, and that offering is sufficient for what you need, then receiving the return is a real option. Not the naive hope over evidence receiving of the original dynamic. The clear-eyed, honestly assessed, genuinely chosen receiving of someone who has looked at what is being offered and decided it is enough. If what you want is something the current evidence does not support, the transformation version, the genuine change version, the actually different operating system version, and the evidence is not yet showing that version, then the decision is different. Not easier. Different. Neither decision makes you the right or wrong kind of person. Neither is the spiritually correct answer. They are both legitimate responses to a real situation evaluated honestly by a real person. What makes either decision serve you is the honesty of it. Whether it is made from your actual assessment of the actual evidence, or from the hoping that needs a particular answer, whether it reflects what you genuinely want, or what the relieved, finally, this resolves the waiting part of you wants, regardless of whether the resolution is the right one. The ruthlessness described throughout this series is exactly what the decision requires. Not the ruthlessness of a particular outcome, the ruthlessness of an honest process, of letting the evidence be primary, of letting your genuine assessment of what you need be the standard against which the offering is measured. There is one more thing worth saying about the return that does not get said enough. You are allowed to want it, simply, without qualifying the wanting into something more sophisticated, without immediately converting the genuine pull of the attachment into a problem to be examined or a hope to be assessed for its evidence basis. The wanting is real. It was always real. The love that produced the investment throughout the dynamic was genuine, and it does not become ungenuine because the dynamic was insufficient. The specific, particular pull of this specific person, their warmth, their complexity, their moments of genuine presence, the specific texture of being known by them in the incomplete but real way they knew you, that is a real thing to want back. You are allowed to want it, and you are also allowed to hold the wanting alongside the clear-eyed assessment of whether what is being returned is what the wanting is actually reaching for. To feel the pull without following it blindly, to be moved without being reorganized, to want genuinely and assess honestly and decide consciously, all three simultaneously. That is the mature version of this, not the suppression of the wanting in the name of clarity, not the surrender to the wanting in the name of love. The holding of both. The genuine, complicated, entirely human experience of wanting something and seeing it clearly at the same time. The return, if it comes, is not the end of the story. It is a moment in it, an important moment. A moment that reveals something about who they currently are and what they are currently capable of, and whether the gap between what they offer and what you need has genuinely narrowed. That revelation takes time, ordinary time, unremarkable time. The time of ordinary Tuesdays rather than the charged time of returns and reckonings, and the heightened emotional quality of loss-activated reaching. In that ordinary time, the answer will become clear, not through the framework, through what you actually observe, what you actually feel, what the evidence actually shows. And you, standing on the ground built throughout this entire series, with the clear eyes and the honest instrument and the genuine grounded, independently sourced okayness, that does not depend on the return being the transformation version, you will know what to do with what you see. Not because this series told you, because you know yourself now, well enough, honestly enough, completely enough that the answer, when the evidence provides it, will be recognizable. And whatever it is, you will be okay. Not because the return confirmed the hope, because the okayness was never contingent on the return. It was built from something more durable than that. It was built from you. And that, regardless of what they do or don't do, come back or don't come back, change or continue the pattern, that holds, picking up from where part 3 left off. The decision has been made or is being made. The return has been evaluated or is being evaluated. The clear eyes have done their work or are doing it. And somewhere in the middle of all that, in the genuine, imperfect, uncertainty-containing process of figuring out what to do with what is happening, ordinary life continues. That continuity is worth paying attention to, not as a background detail, as the actual point. Because the return, however significant, however charged with the accumulated weight of everything the dynamic produced, is one thing happening in a life that contains many things. And the life that contains many things is more important than the one thing that is currently demanding the most attention. The avoidance return has a way of collapsing the field, of making everything else recede, while the question of what this means and what to do with it, and whether it is the transformation version, occupies the foreground completely. The field collapses, and suddenly the life that was being genuinely inhabited, the work, the people, the questions, the ordinary Tuesday that belonged to you, all of it becomes background again, waiting again. Suspended again in deference to the primary question of the connection. Notice if that is happening. Not with judgment, with the honest, grounded attention of someone who has worked too hard to rebuild the foreground of their own life to surrender it automatically to the return of the question that used to occupy it. The return does not require the surrender of the foreground. The evaluation can happen alongside the life rather than instead of it. The clear eyes can be doing their work in the ordinary moments without those ordinary moments being consumed by the doing of it. The question can be present without being primary. That is the difference between evaluation and preoccupation. Evaluation is the honest, patient, evidence-based assessment of what is being shown. Preoccupation is the return to the suspended posture, the life waiting in the background while the question of the connection dominates the interior. You have been in the suspended posture before. You know its texture. You know the specific quality of days that are happening, but not quite being inhabited, because the attention is primarily elsewhere. You know what it costs. The ruthlessness means noticing when the return is pulling toward that posture and choosing, consciously, to remain in the life instead, to let the evaluation happen in the margins rather than the center, to keep the center for what belongs there. What belongs in the center is the same thing that has always belonged there, your actual, present, genuinely happening life, not as a consolation for the uncertainty of the return, as the primary thing. The thing that was always primary and that the dynamic in its various forms kept displacing to the margins. It does not get displaced again, not automatically, not by the pull of the return however genuine, not by the warmth of their reaching however real, not by the hope of the transformation version however understandable. The center holds, not through discipline, through the genuine, built, structurally present reality of a life that has enough actual substance to occupy the center on its own terms. The work that matters, the people who are actually there, the questions that are genuinely yours. The ordinary Tuesday that is simply, completely, irreplaceably your own. That center, held through everything the return activates, held imperfectly but held, is the most important thing you bring to whatever comes next. Whether the return proves to be the transformation version or the discomfort version, whether the decision is to receive it or to maintain the distance, whether the outcome is the hoped-for one or the honest one that differs from the hoped-for. The center holds. And from the center, from the ground of your actual life being actually lived, every outcome is navigable. Every decision is makeable. Every honest assessment is survivable. Because here is what genuine recovery from this kind of dynamic actually looks like at this stage. Not the complete absence of feeling for the person, not the clean, resolved, nothing left to process state that healing is sometimes described as producing, not the certainty that the decision is right, or the confidence that the outcome will be the one you want. It looks like being able to hold the feeling and the clarity simultaneously, the genuine warmth of their return and the honest assessment of what it shows. The pull of the attachment and the grounded knowledge of what the attachment has historically produced. The wanting and the seeing clearly at the same time. That simultaneous holding, feeling without being swept away, seeing clearly without becoming cold, is the actual achievement. The thing that all the ground building and okayness arriving and ruthlessness developing was producing. Not the elimination of the complicated, the capacity to hold it without being destabilized by it. You have that capacity now, more than you did at the beginning of this, more than you had when the dynamic was at its most consuming, not perfectly, not without the moments when the feeling overwhelms the clarity, or the clarity feels like it is overriding the feeling, but genuinely, structurally, as a feature of who you have become through the honest, costly, unglamorous work of everything examined in this series. The avoidant who is coming back, who wants you hooked, whose reaching is genuine, and whose motivation may be transformation or may be the discomfort of your absence, that person is encountering you differently than they encountered you before, whether they know it or not. They are encountering someone who has done work they have not seen, who has built ground in the period of their absence, who is holding their return with a quality of attention that is warmer and clearer and more honestly discerning than the quality of attention they were accustomed to receiving, who is genuinely glad of their warmth and genuinely unmoved off their own ground by it simultaneously. That combination, glad and grounded, warm and clear, open and honest, is the most genuine thing you can offer the return. Not the performance of having moved on, Not the strategic deployment of indifference, not the managed presentation of someone who has rehearsed how to receive this moment. Just you, honestly, with the genuine warmth that is still real, and the genuine clarity that is also real, and the ground that holds both without requiring either to be suppressed. That is what they are encountering. Whether they are ready to meet it genuinely is the question the evidence will answer. Give it time, give it ordinary time. And in the ordinary time, live your life fully. Without waiting for the evidence to arrive before you return to the foreground is yours. It was always yours, and whatever the return becomes, you remain in it, present, grounded, completely and finally your own.